Hello and welcome to our new series on Business Starter Bootcamp. We are delighted you've decided to join us, and we promise to make it worth your while. In this series, we'll go through step-by-step detailed instructions on what does it take to start a new business. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with an adage that we very strongly believe in, that every problem can be solved. You just need to learn how to approach the problem the right way. You need to learn how to develop assistance that you need to reach your target. You need to learn how to identify your partners who can help you get there. And you need to learn what tools can speed up your journey. And then find your way to acquire those tools. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce the program. So what's this course about? This course comprises of 5 weekly lectures per course, and we have got 4 courses in the entire bootcamp program. So the Business Starter program bootcamp comprises of 4 courses, and each course contains 5 lectures apiece. So what will you learn in this course, in this entire program? You learn how to succeed in business, which means everything you need to know on the basics, the fundamentals, the operations, everything about the business. You learn how to manage it and how to be proactive in managing all aspects of your business. You learn what some of the common problems are that cause companies to fail, and you learn how to avoid those problems. You learn some very critical lessons in crisis management. What's a crisis? How can you develop this foresight to be able to see it from coming and before it really hits you, before you see the impact? And what do you do when if you find yourself in the midst of a crisis? You learn all the steps of prevention and then management and then learning after the fact. You learn how to develop a business plan, all aspects, all sections, all components of a business plan. You learn how to come up with a startup checklist. And you learn the profitability and explosive growth. You learn how to start a business, how to become profitable, how to launch your product or your service, and how to reach the basic levels of profitability that allows you to keep going, and ultimately you reach the level where you can aim for explosive growth. We'll walk you through all of these steps. So in this first lecture, what are we going to cover? We'll introduce the program, and then we'll define who the target audience. Clearly, not every presentation can be designed with every person out there, so we need to really be very specific about who we're trying to target with this presentation. We'll spend a few minutes talking about that. And then we'll go over some very high level as well as detailed levels about business ownership in general. What does it take really for you to be a part of a business, to own a business, to run and operate a business, and then to make it successful? We learned some of the common problems that companies face and how would you take care of those problems. We learn what are the 7 stages of a business. And this, for the first lecture, is one of the primary presentations that we'll be focusing a large part of this presentation on the 7 stages. So please stay tuned for that. And finally, we'll talk about all the downloadable material that's going to be made available. We'll provide you with the links and access points on how would you get your hands on those. So with that, let's continue taking the next step in this journey. So who's the target of this training program? Well, if you're a current business owner, then you definitely stand to benefit a lot from some of the fundamentals that we'll be talking about here. So isn't it too late, some might ask? If you're giving you the very fundamentals and the very basics and you've already gone through it, you're already in business, you're running it, isn't it too late? Definitely not. Because if you have missed a couple of important points in your initial analysis, now would be a good time for you to go back, figure out what you needed to have done, and find a time to do them now. They'll definitely cover a lot of ground for you as you continue your journey and continue your march towards an explosive growth organization. So definitely you stand to benefit a lot even if you are currently in business. And of course, if you're not currently in business, but you are aspiring to be one, you've got ideas for products, there's a service you could perform, you're very passionate about a hobby that you might have, and you want to put it out there, you need this course to walk you through all the steps, detailed steps, where we hold your hand and tell you exactly what to expect and how to give yourself a fighting chance. What about silent partners? The people who invest in businesses. They're not, even though they're not operationally responsible with any of the steps that the businesses have to go through. But put yourself in the shoes of someone who has invested the money, and yet the business is not doing as well as you'd expect them to do. Wouldn't you want to understand what's going on? Wouldn't you want to be able to read the tea leaves, figure out what ails the company, where they're falling short, and what they could do to turn the situation around? So again, the knowledge and the insight that we're going to be sharing in these lectures, they will really you stand to benefit a lot by this presentation. Let's keep going. What if you're a manager or an executive of an existing company? So you're not the business owner. How would you benefit from this program? Clearly, we are focusing on the general operations, everything to do about the operation, how to maximize the profit margin, how to deal with customers, define your product, your gross profit margin, how do you maximize that, how do you improve your operations, remove all the obstacles, improve the quality of your product. Now, none of these requires ownership. The only difference between an owner and a manager at the high level is ultimately where the final dollar goes. But if you clearly think about it, as a manager, you have got the same objective as any owner would have, right? As an executive, you'd want the company to grow the same way as any owner would grow. But in the process, you could acquire some very, very crucial skills that'll benefit you not just in the journey within this organization, but makes you a lot more marketable for you to find your next job. Or maybe eventually one day you might decide to throw your hat in the ring and start your own operation. The lessons that we're going to be sharing in this presentation, they'll go a long way in preparing you for that, for whatever comes next in your career. There are people who have a mastery of a skill. You might be the best cook amongst all your friends. You might know how to stitch a quilt. You might know how to paint, oil paint, watercolor paint, any medium. You might be the best in using Microsoft Excel, and you want to share your skill with other people. Now, of course, you can do it at a very small scale and always stay at that level. Do it as a side gig, and all power to you if you decide to do that. But if you try to get serious and try to really expand upon the skill that you already have and launch a business, then these slides here, the recommendations here, would help you a great deal in trying to identify what your options would be, how would you go about doing it step by step, how would you do it. So again, please stay tuned. If this is the bucket you belong in, you have a command over on a skill and you want to maximize it. Similar to that is the next point, people with a unique hobby. Now, even though there is a very technical legal definition of what a hobby is and how it differs from a business ownership, and we refer you to some of the legal documents that we'll probably make available as a part of this presentation. But just to get you to understand that a hobby is what you on the side that you enjoy doing. It's not necessarily meant to make a profit. And when you spend your money and your time on that, the money that you spend is not deductible on your taxes. Whereas if you spend the same amount of money in the pursuit of a business, even if you're just starting off and you don't have a profit coming in right now, but that money, that investment could be counted as a business investment. So again, we recommend that you seek out an attorney, a tax attorney who can walk you through the steps. But regardless, the point of this presentation here is that if you have a hobby that you want to really make a business out of, then these few minutes with us will help you understand what steps you could go through. And finally, if you're in none of the first six brackets, but you know someone who is, you have a family member or a friend who's going through these steps, who owns a business and who's not doing as well as they should be. You could help them out. You could go through these lessons here and maybe pick up a nugget or two and help them what they could be doing. Either share the presentation with them and get them to come in and learn on their own, or be an expert in some of the areas that you feel they might be lacking in, and help them out. They're your friend, they're your family. Wouldn't you want to do that? All right, let's keep going. So what material will be provided as a part of this presentation? Of course, in-person training that you're going through right now, or an online training that you're going through. We'll make available some PDFs with some more information. So as we mentioned, information or checklist, which is the next point here, we'll make them available. We'll provide you with the links on where you could go to register at the site and to download all the material that we're mentioning here. They'll all be made available to all the participants of this training program. Each time we introduce a new topic, even though we'll try to give it enough of a coverage within this presentation itself, we clearly understand that we're trying to create these lectures to go anywhere between 45 and 50 minutes, and we really don't have the time to take every aspect and go into the detail that it really requires for you to fully understand. So when that happens, we'll create a short 8 to 10 minute video segment, make it available free of charge on either on our YouTube channel, or we'll provide you with the link so you could watch those and have the basic understanding. And some of the topics may require a very detailed depth. And for those, we'll make available some online courses that we might have already created on those subjects. And we'll make those courses also available to everyone who goes through these presentations. So stay tuned for that. That's the full length course, training course that we just talked about. And access to community. What's a community? Community is a group of people who have got a shared objective, and they're in the same boat. They're moving in the similar direction, and they're there to help each other out. What's the best way to learn? In fact, if you think about it for a moment, how is it that we learn? We learn by reading a book. We learn by watching a video. We learn when someone walks us through a certain thing, and we try to understand. Maybe we'll ask them questions to fully understand. You go to school, for example, to learn. But how do you truly learn? We truly learn by actually doing something with our hands, what we just learned in theory. So if that's the way for us to learn, but clearly you don't want to make the mistakes and learn the hard way on what you did not realize when you're stepping out into a new direction. So that's where the community comes in. For you to partner with others who are like you, as we said earlier, in a similar boat, trying to get something out. For example, if you are trying to come up with a social media campaign, and let's say you are a doctor, it doesn't matter if the next person who's speaking with you on the same topic owns a plumbing company. You both have similar needs. How do you create a brand? How do you create an image for yourselves? What platform should you be on? How do you create more content? How do you engage with your customers? Similar needs, right? When someone posts something negative about you, how do you manage that? How do you deal with your reputation management? All aspects of your online brand, you could learn from the other person. So this is where once again the sense of community comes in, and we very strongly believe that if we just give you the courses in themselves and ask you to go out and make the best happen, you could certainly do that. But by giving you a community within which you could do that, we're giving you really all the tools you would need to be able to really flourish and take the next step. And finally, your ability to lead within the practice. So all the courses that we are making available, we really want you to become a master in all aspects of these courses. And as we go through the program, we learn how some of this comes into play. So with this, let's take the next step. Let's define who we are and why you really should pay attention to us. So we are advisors for Fortune 1000 companies and as well as small and medium-sized businesses. We'll we'll go really fast in this presentation in this slide. 100 plus years of cumulative. We are a large team. Obviously, we're not 100 years old ourselves, but we're a large team for a total cumulative experience of this amount. And clearly, we have seen many economic downturn, many recessions, many types of business cycles. So we are able to help you out, and whenever you are dealing with a problem that we may have seen in some shape or form in our earlier consulting careers. We worked with startups on their first product and helped their growth. And we have helped teams in starting their franchises. And we also advise companies on legal and financial structure and partnership agreements. So, very quick list of some of the achievements and strengths that we have. Clearly, your financial projection, your road profitability, operational excellence is one of our core competence. That when we approach a company, when we see what they are and what they do and how they do it, we can usually find opportunities for them to improve, to cut down on some of the waste, to improve the level of communication they've got going on internally, to identify what some of the problems are with either the products or the delivery, or as we said earlier, internal communication, and how do they improve? How do they improve everything they do? So we really focus on that. Cost of goods sold and of course your pricing optimization. Operational matrix. How do you know that you are actually on track to achieve your results? If you don't have the matrix, if you're not measuring your results, then you may be achieving them, or you may be falling short, or you may be falling substantially behind your targets. How would you know if you're not measuring? So we'll teach you, we'll guide you on what kind of matrix you should have in place and how you would measure them. All new project launches, all new product launches, the entire launch strategy. You don't just do things out of vacuum or just because you decide to do that. You got to have a detailed strategy, and that's where we come in and where we help our clients go through all of that. And then sales projections, of course, and channel management. What channels are you selling your products on? Is it an online product? Is it sold in store? Are you a reseller? Who is selling your products? What level of information have you shared with them? Everything to do with your product sales. We help you identify that and select the right options for you. And of course, no product sales would be complete without an extensive handle on supply chain and logistics, and we help you set up on these parameters as well. And these are some of the clients that we have worked with over a period of time. As you can well see, it's a large list of companies. We don't really have to develop on what we have done for them, but as you can see, as we have mentioned earlier, we're experienced in some of the topics that we're going to be covering in this presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and continue. We all dream of starting a business, don't we? We're here for a reason. We want to learn as much as we can to give ourselves a good chance of succeeding. You look at YouTube, you talk to your friends. Not only we aspire to start a business, but we are surrounded by TED talks, by inspirational speeches, by people telling us it's possible. Just do it. Just get off of your comfort zone. Just go out and do it. Quit your job tomorrow, and you'll be able to do it. Just if I can do it, you can do it as well. Yes, all this is great. Of course, inspiration is key. It makes you wake up in the morning and get excited. It is crucial. But so is strategy. So is having a roadmap. So is having a path to profitability. Without that, you could have all the inspiration in the world, but if you got the wrong product or the wrong timing or the wrong environment within which you're operating, you're not likely to do very well. There are limitations. So let's figure out what the limitations are. Let's try to find out about them. Let's educate ourselves as much as possible. So yes, once again, inspirational speeches are great. Let's definitely hold on to those, but let's also figure out that we need to do a few things the right way. So let's see what they are. But why though? Why do we want to own our own business? Nothing new here, nothing groundbreaking here. We want freedom. Freedom to work when we want, and freedom to not work when we don't want to work. When we just want to be at the beach and we want to relax. We don't want anyone else to tell us what to do. We hate our bosses, don't we? Okay, sometimes we do. We don't want them to be telling us what to do. We want to be our own bosses. We want to control our own destiny. We want to write our own checks. We want to do all of that. And yes, we want to make millions of dollars. We've seen people on TV do that. We've read accounts of people in all magazines and business shows where people can do it. People maybe less qualified than us have done that. Why couldn't it be us? We've got aspirations as well, and we have a passion. We want to share the passion with other people. Again, as we mentioned earlier, it could be our cooking, it could be the way we draw, it could be the way we paint, it could be the way we drive a car, it could be the way we use Microsoft Excel. Anything that we have and we have a passion for, and we want to share that with others, there's a very, very strong and compelling reason why we should be sharing with other people. Or we have a skill. We want to make money with the skill. We all have skills, don't we? We are really good in something. All our friends are marvel at us. And how is it that you're able to, whether it's mental math, whether it's a sense of navigation, whatever it is that we do, even how quickly we can use an iPhone to find a certain product. These are all skills that we have, and we put them to use in our own personal lives. Maybe our friends could benefit from that. Why not make it a side gig? Why not make money from that? Right? All the right answers, and definitely these are all very strong, compelling reasons why we would want to go off and do something. So let's find our own reasons. Everyone has got theirs. Let's find out what they are. But before we do that, think about this. You're not the only one who's got these aspirations. Here's a recent study published just a few months ago that 5.4 million new business applications were filed in 2021, last year. 5.4 million in the country, the highest ever. The previous year was about 20% less, 4.4 million in the year before. So clearly, one could say that maybe the current pandemic has got something to do with it. Maybe the notion of mass resignation that we've been reading about and hearing about, maybe there's some that could be at play here. People are just fed up with their lives or the boundaries that the jobs impose on them, and they want to go off and do something on their own. That may well be what's at play here, or maybe that could be a part of what's at play here. Regardless, these are stunning numbers. 5.4 million new businesses were registered. Now, whether they all actually get started or not, usually they say that about two-thirds of the businesses would actually get started and start bringing in some capital, in some investment, and some money will start coming in. One-third may not ever get off the ground. But regardless, these are stunning numbers. Did you know, and here's the downside. Here's the bad news. Did you know that 30% of all new businesses shut down in the first 2 years? Did you know that less than half of all new businesses barely survive beyond their fifth anniversary? Here's an article that we are referring, published by Forbes magazine, obviously a leading industry publication, and we'll point out this piece of data. Let's stare at this for a moment. That 20% of small businesses would fail in the first year of their operation. 20%, that's 1 in 5, will fail in the first year. 30% will fail in the second year. 50% of all businesses would have failed by the fifth year, and 70% by the 10th year. So if you think about this, if you try to flip around this argument and say, so it means that as long as we do something right, we play our cards well, then we have a 30% chance of success beyond the 10th year. That's absolutely true. But let's understand what success here means. Success here simply means the threshold is very, very low for this publication. They're just saying that you are still in operation after 10 years. It doesn't mean that you have made billions and you're off to a and you've bought multiple mansions in the Bahamas and all the desirable areas of the world, and you've got a private jet and you are going around the world. It doesn't mean that. It simply means you have survived. It could be a mom and pop operation where your family is running it, and the moment you walk away from the business ends. So really, the numbers are stark and they are not very encouraging. Let's look at something else. As it turns out, understanding where founders often go wrong can help others get it right. Absolutely. This is exactly where we come in, to help you learn from other people's mistakes. Okay, let's now continue with this presentation. Let's mention some other bad news. Yes, let's try to get them out of the way before we jump on to all the good things that you came here to learn today, right? You came here to learn about all the positive things. Let's get these out of the way so we could focus on the positive. According to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, nearly 40% of small businesses fail to reopen after being hit by a natural disaster. What's a natural disaster? Earthquake, hurricane, we all know that. The recent pandemic that we have gone through, it could potentially quantify as a natural disaster as well. But regardless, look at the staggering failure rate. If you drive around the town, any town, look at any shopping center, count how many vacancy signs we have or leads available signs we see across them, and find and think up in your mind how much of these signs, how many of these signs were just not there a couple of years early, 2 or 3 years earlier. So clearly we are seeing the decline in the market, and all the most of the decline comes by way of small businesses. Here's one aspect of business operation: your customers. Clearly, we all understand the customers are the one who are putting money in your pocket. Without them, you have nothing. No matter you might be offering the best product in the world, the best service in the world. Nobody else has it. But unless you've got paying customers who are willing to pull out their wallet and pay for them, there's nothing. So here's some staggering statistics. The customer's churn rate. What's the churn rate? That's the rate at which the customers leave you. Why do they leave you? We have got a detailed presentation. We'll provide you the link to go and check it out in detail. They leave for multiple reasons, but just the fact that they have left. Look at these stats across different industries. That if you are a cable provider, 25% of your customers leave every year. General retail, 24%. Financial or a bank or a credit card, 25%. Going down the list, if you're a big box electronic company, 11% of your customers are leaving you. Imagine how much you have spent in acquiring the customers, what kind of promotions you've had to offer to get them to either come in the first time or then to stay with you. Whatever you do, despite all that, these staggering percentage of customers are likely to leave you. Sobering, right? Let's look at another piece of statistics. Let's look at the highlighted portion. Consumers returned $428 billion worth of products in the year 2020. That's just about 10% of total sales. This figure comes to about 30% of all online purchases. So if you think that you just launched a new product online and you have $1,000 in the first 1 month, and you are jumping around with joy and celebration, yes, your celebration is well earned, but think about the fact that 30% of them will potentially come back in some shape or form. And we suggest you go ahead and check out these links. Every piece of statistic that we mentioned here, the links have been provided, so please do check them out if you want to go probe into more detail and figure out why did this happen. We, by the way, also have a presentation on why the products come back to you. You're welcome to check that out as well for many useful insights and what you could do to prevent that from happening. So we just mentioned some of the problems that companies face. Clearly, there's a lot more. Companies fail because of lack of access to capital. You don't have money to grow. You don't have money to invest in the right direction. You've got quality issues, manufacturing issues, whether in-house manufacturing or you're dealing with a vendor, an outside vendor. They've got issues. Maybe your product or design was not the best. Maybe the engineering made some assumptions that they should not have made. Maybe you've got product features which are now outdated. Maybe the industry has moved on and you have not moved on. And we'll be giving you throughout this entire course many examples of products that dominated the entire market. But then they allowed the market to go past them and they remained stuck to where they were, and as a result they lost entirely their market share. There are many examples of that happening. Product platform changes, but you did not change with it. Failure to keep up is one of the biggest reasons why companies fail. Inadequate customer support is really as simple as just these words suggest that your customers, you had customers. We just talked a moment ago how customers leave. We talked about customer churn. Think about what happened before they churned, before they walked away. They reached out to you. They had problems and they gave you a chance to fix them, but you did not. The support that you provided was supposed to make it right for them. Clearly, you did not. Inadequate customer support. That's one of the principal reasons, again, that causes customers to drift away from you, and as a result, the company's foundation uh, slows down. Let's keep going. Unfair comparative forces. Nobody said the world is fair. Nobody said that just because we are doing something right, others will be playing by our rule book as well. People cheat, companies cheat, they go behind your back. They're not supposed to approach your customers, and yet they do. Bad things happen all the time, but we were not vigilant enough. We were not looking behind our back. We were not watching them. And again, just because somebody played unfair, we are the ones now who are facing the brunt of that. This happens all the time as well. And then what about fair competition? Disruption. We've all heard the word disruption probably millions of times in the last few years. Somebody sitting in the garage coming up with a mousetrap that's much better than yours. That's the fear that's been drilled into all of our minds. Isn't that a reality? Isn't that a real strong possibility that someone is creating something, designing something that will be admired by someone, and some of them might be buying the products from you, and they might decide to go off and buy it from them instead. Disruption could happen to anyone and everyone. It could happen to the best of us. But if you're not vigilant, if you're not looking out for that, then you're the one who'll pay the price. Declining customer engagement. How many companies actually pay attention to how much you're using the product? If you think about it, for many companies, the fact that you bought something is good enough for them, and then they just leave you alone without realizing that if you stop engaging them with them, if you stop using the product, then there's a very strong possibility for you to not renew the annual term and you walk away. Think about how many online newspaper subscriptions do you have. Do they even care that you're using the product less and less? Do they even care that you haven't logged on to the website in months at a time? So when it comes time for a renewal, when you decide to leave, when you decide to not renew, and they still act surprised, and then they start coming after you by giving you one promotion after another, trying to retain you as a customer. They clearly failed when they did not take into account the fact that your engagement is dropping, and they did nothing to retain you at that time. Let's keep going. Some of the other reasons why companies fail, why businesses fail. The product lifecycle or roadmap. It was not sufficient or it wasn't detailed enough, and there was not no cohesive clarity within the organization, and the company faltered. Government regulations. They're there to prevent the society and the consumers and even the companies themselves, but clearly they come at a cost. And if you don't account for them, if you're not careful in how do we deal with them, they could come and clamp us down. They could come and shut us down. So again, another important thing to really to keep an eye on, to be very vigilant on, and companies that don't do that, they find out to their own peril. Disagreement between partners. Clearly, it happens all the time. People are not clones of each other. They don't think exactly as other people do. And especially when you've got conflicting interests, you've got money at stake, and your decision potentially could impact my payout or vice versa. Things happen. Things happen between the best friends. Things happen between family members. But when bad things happen, when these disagreements reach a point where they're not able to to find a way to mediate, then the entire companies, entire organizations could fall apart. Think about what happened between if you follow the story of Apple, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the founders of the company, the best relationship ever between a marketing genius and a technical guru who were the brains behind the company. Think about what happened between them. Disagreement about where the company was and where the company should have been taken. Right? It happens. Lack of vision. Clearly, A company can only go what they're able to see. They can only take a journey towards an area that they've defined, that they've decided to go. If you don't do that, then you only go down. You only go south. That's really as simple as that. So lack of vision could be very detrimental to all organizations. Inconsistent planning, very similar to the point earlier. You don't plan to grow. You don't plan to take the right steps. You don't plan to figure out what's next and what you could do about that. Branding or messaging, again, you fail to include, you fail to take into account what others are conceiving your company as. And when you do that, then clearly you do no longer have control over the messaging about the organization. You don't pay attention to that, again, to your own detriment. Inventory, warehouse. Imagine why what this could cost. You have customers, they're coming into you, but they don't find the products on your shelves. Maybe you haven't ordered enough, or maybe you had issues with your supply chain, and you were not proactive in solving the problems. Regardless of what caused the problem, the fact is that today a customer walked in, they came in through the door, they had the option to go to any of your competitors, they chose not to. They chose to support you with their business, and they came in through the door, but they didn't find what you have. Imagine the cost. Imagine the cost of that. Was the customer likely to come back? Have you retained the customer's confidence? Even if they might still come back occasionally, but the trust that you probably had before this, it may have gone back just a notch or two. So you need to be very mindful about what the problems that happen to an organization. They're not just one-off problems, but they usually are a sign of what's around the corner, what could be coming next. They talk about the what areas you're focusing on and what areas are not on your horizon. Let's keep going. Imperfect channel management. Again, we mentioned this earlier. Where you're selling the product, how you're selling the product, what kind of support is needed for those channels, on if you're providing those supports or not, if you've got the right focus on those channels or not. Employee issues. Every company has got employee issues, but the question is, what are you doing about them? How are you dealing with them? How are you empowering your employees? How are you training them? This is what really makes or breaks a company. And finally, the lack of contingency planning. We mentioned crisis management earlier on in this presentation. Failure to plan ahead. Failure to plan ahead it could be one of the biggest issues that a company could face, and it could lead to the failure of the entire organization. What's the common thing about all these 19 points? And mind you, there are much more than 19. We just covered some of them in the interest of time. We'll provide links down below for a detailed presentation on this topic, on what causes companies to fail. In fact, this is such a huge topic that we are planning an extensive training sessions on this topic, and we're writing a book as well. Please follow the links below to sign up for an advanced copy of the book when it's available. So what's common across all of these items that we have covered here? They're preventable. They're not easy. Look at the first point, lack of access to capital. No one said it's easy. We're not saying that you had the money in the bank, you just did not use the money in the right area. They're preventable from the standpoint of planning, from the standpoint of awareness. If you're aware of the fact that you have a problem, you're going to do something about it. You look at point number 18, employee issues. If you are aware of the fact that employees are not able to communicate well, or there's disharmony across the teams, or there's too much of ownership, or there's too limited information sharing across the teams, if you're aware of them, you'd then be able to solve them. So the first point is to understand what causes businesses to fail, companies to fail, and what you could do to mitigate those. But once you are aware, you could then come up with a strategy with some steps that you could go through to prevent those problems. Okay, so having fun? What's the answer now? We gave you all the problems. We told you everything wrong there is to know about owning a company. So here's something that we really must acknowledge, that you should make every experience matter, good or bad. It teaches us something. If it's something good, then yeah, keep doing it. If it's something bad, then stop doing it. But why is it bad? It teaches us something. Let's always realize that. Let's focus on learning. Whether good or bad, as we just mentioned, it could teach you something. But everything thing we do, we're solving a problem. Each time you're talking to a customer, you're engaging with them, you're trying to understand who they are, where they're coming from, why they're buying your product, why they're out there in front of you, what need in their lives they have that your product is solving for them. You need, and the more you know, the more aware you are of those, the better you're able to help your customer in whatever your product roadmap would be, whatever your next steps would be, whatever your next strategy would be. But you really must understand as much as possible, and not just about customers, about your utility bills, about the regional laws which are going to be enacted and how they could impact your organization. Everything you do, everywhere you turn, there's something going on that requires your focus and your attention, and there's an opportunity for you to learn something, and learn and improve. Let's keep going. Always do the right thing. Easier said, but we must absolutely underline this. Always do the right thing, no matter how hard it feels. Hard things usually feel wrong at the time. The wrong path, the shortcuts, they seem easier. But we strongly suggest, we urge you to not look at the wrong path. It comes back and haunts you in the final analysis. When you are, just one silly example perhaps, you are measuring something for the customer. They're not out there in front of you. So whether you give them 1.7 pounds or 1.8 pounds, they're probably not out there looking at your scale, at your measure. And they may not even have the scale at that level of precision at home, so they could counter verify it or not. You could maybe take out a grain or two, but don't do that. Don't do that. You're working hard to make honest living. You're deploying a product. You're coming up with a service. If you cut yourself, the customer short, ultimately you're cutting yourself short. Surround yourselves by experts. Life is too short. Business life cycle is too short for you to make mistakes. Clearly, we just talked about learning from the experiences, but isn't it best to not make the mistakes in the first place? And how do you prevent them? By surrounding yourself by experts, by surrounding yourself by people who have got the vision or the experience to have looked ahead. They've been where you're going. They know what pitfalls, what challenges await you in the future, and get them to guide you on what you could do about those. So absolutely every aspect of your operation, unless it's one of your core competencies or your specialties, if it's not, then reach out to experts and bring them on board. Get them to guide you, get them to advise you. And plan, and then plan some more. Everything you do shouldn't just happen by default, shouldn't just happen by itself just because it happened. It's got to be, you got to be proactive, and everything that happens, it must be a conscious effort, and you intend it for something to happen. And clearly, with so much going on, you really have to be a master in managing your time. You should always be willing to take risks and yet be prepared to fail. You should be an optimist. Absolutely, you should be an optimist and always look forward to the best while being prepared for things to go wrong. And trust us, believe us, things will always find a way to go wrong. You just need to be able to prevent those. You just need to be able to minimize the impact. So this training program that we're offering here, there are ultimately two types of training that we could, in a very broad categorization. It could be knowledge focus, where we're teaching you something, the conceptual description of something, or if it's action based. What's an example of this? Let's say we're explaining to you. Let's say you come to here. Let's say we are a driving school, and we're teaching you how to drive a car. Teaching you how to drive a car is a very action specific. We're telling you how to sit, how to put the seat belt on, how to adjust your seat and the rear view mirrors, and how to look, how to turn, where to put your hands. This is all action. This is all things that you need to do. You need to deploy from tomorrow when you're behind the wheels driving the car. We'll teach you how to hit the brakes, when to start hitting the brake. We will not teach you the mechanics of what happens when you hit the brake pedal. We will not tell you what happens when you hit the accelerator and the car starts going faster, and how much of fuel is being pulled from the fuel injection, depending upon what kind of a car you have, and what's truly happening. We will not go into the details of that. But if it's a course, different course where we're teaching you the mechanics of a car, the workability of a car, then yes, we'll be focusing on that as well. So when it comes to providing training for a business, we obviously cannot be at either of these two extremes. We cannot be focusing just on the action and action alone, thing that you could do today, without giving you a big picture, without giving you a broad, high level perspective of where you need to be headed. So we clearly have to do that as well. But if we focus too much on that, then we lose out on some of the specific actions that you need to be performing. So we'll be going through a hybrid, and as we mentioned earlier, the hybrid requires for us to stay at a slightly higher level, mention the pros and cons and the pitfalls of what you might be dealing with. We'll mention in theory what it might be, and then we'll give you resources. We'll make them available to you to help you understand at the very detailed level on what could be going on. So about learning, here is something that we strongly believe in. Give a man a fish and you fed him for a day. But you teach a man to fish and you have fed him for the rest of his life. Attributed to Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher of the 6th century. Whether it's actually said by him or not, no one could verify that. But this is something we really strongly believe in it. And again, what we have mentioned earlier and throughout the presentation, the whole notion of learning, this really is about that. You have taught somebody something of value, something that they can use. This is really what this consulting practice is all about. So let's now continue to sharing with others the knowledge that we have. All right, so how are we doing on time? Still with us? Let's keep going. So, what's going on here? Group of happy people. 7 stages of business. The journey from idea to startup to massive profits. So, what happens? You start with a problem, with a description of a problem, and you try to solve the problem, but then you're not able to solve the problem. So you engage a team, a big team, experienced team. They try to come up with the right solution, and they are able to make it happen. Thumbs up, we succeeded, and now you've got happy customers. So, again, could it be any simpler than this? Yeah, but there's of course a lot more that goes behind it. So let's go ahead and find out what it is. So the 7 stages of business. Let's figure out what the 7 stages are. The first stage is self-assessment. Are you ready to be a business owner? Let's pause here for just a moment and describe in a little bit more detail what is it that we're trying to do. Every business out there, whether they are thinking about a business, they're coming up with an idea, or they're already in operation, it falls into these brackets, into these. Actually, the first 6. We'll talk about the 7th in a few minutes. They fall into one of these brackets. In every bracket, which stage your company is in, what stage your product is in, that really drives what principal focus areas you have to be focusing on, what areas have to be occupying all your entire mind. You cannot be double-minded of those. And when the same item presents itself when you're in a different bucket, then your response will be a little different. And we'll go over these examples as we continue with this presentation. So please stay tuned on that. But regardless, the point that we're trying to make here is that the 7 stages of business are you absolutely have to understand what they are, but every step has been designed for a reason. And we have got dozens and dozens of presentations on the different modules that belong into these presentations, and as we hit those during the course of this bootcamp, we'll provide the links so you're able to benefit from those as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the first stage, self-assessment. Are you ready to be a business owner? So this stage is all about your assessment. What skills, what traits are required for you to be a successful business owner? Do you have those or not? We'll help you identify those with extensive detailed checklists and questionnaires. The second point, second stage, a spotlight on business. So let's say we go through the step. The first stage, we interviewed you and we passed you. Passed you meaning that we said, okay, yes, you are ready to take the next step. You're ready to be in business. You've got the finances ready. You've got the time. You've got the skills that are needed, and you're now ready to take the next step. Great, awesome. Let's figure out what the next step is. Next step is business evaluation. What business you're trying to get into, the due diligence about the business. Maybe you looked at some for sale listing. Maybe you are interested in those. Financial analysis for all of those options. Detailed planning. What does it take to succeed? The road to profitability. Do you have what it takes for that particular business? Is it an online location? Is it a physical store? How would you run this business? What operational experience do you need to have, and what kind of employees would you need to have? We'll cover all of this in stage two. Stage one and two, clearly they're all about planning. And once you have identified a business, once you're ready to take the next step, step three is effectively the road, the steps you need to do, the checklist until you open up your door, until either you physically open up your door and the customer walks in, or you launch your website. Either way, whichever vehicle, whichever channel you've got, how you're deploying your products or services. In stage three, we'll walk you through the detailed steps of the legal structure, product design, the whole roadmap, your strategy, manufacturing options, everything to do with those. This is at a very high level. We're going through these seven stages. In the next few minutes, we'll cover these sections in these stages in a lot more detail. Stage four, that's your startup. So now you have opened up your operation. Customers are coming in. You are now in existence. You have launched the business. The initial ramp up. What does it take now for you to succeed at this level? What should be your focal areas at this stage? Who are your employees? Basic operational checklist. We'll cover that. We'll cover all of those in this section. And stage five is perfecting your day-to-day operations, consolidation. That means everything that you are doing so far. Stage four was all about survival. You don't want to be the statistics that we mentioned earlier, people who go out of business. We want you to succeed. And you have done that. You have succeeded. You're still in operation. Stage five is when we take a look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, and go through a massive improvement in your operations, in your product quality, in your customer service, in your customer acquisition, all aspects of your business. That all happens in stage five. And if you have successfully gone through stage five, stage six is when the real benefits come in, when the so-called proverbial millions start coming in. Your massive growth, your expansion plans, your global plans. How would you open up multiple locations? How would you go about doing that? Who will run those locations? Your employee strategy, everything to do for you to really grow massively in this section, stage six. We'll be talking about that. And finally, your final exit, stage seven, exit strategy. Exit could be really good. Your company got acquired and you made a lot of money. It could be really, really good. You went IPO and you made millions, or it could be bad. Maybe you went out of business. Maybe you had a product or a service that had a failure at some levels, and then we found it feasible to not just continue the business anymore. We'll have a lot of discussions and lectures and presentations on the exit strategy. Let's stay tuned for those as well. So with that, let's go ahead and start focusing on the first stage, what we'll actually be covering in this stage. So are you a good fit to be a business owner? So these are the questions that you really must ask yourself. And again, the question, are you a good fit to be a business owner? This is not just to satisfy someone, to just take it very casually and say, yeah, of course I am. I've been doing it for 10 years. I know exactly what needs to be done. We all have been buying gas since we started to learn how to drive a car. But do we really know this business enough to be able to purchase a gas station? Clearly, we don't. So, if you are a good fit to be a business owner, that really requires a very honest self-assessment from everyone. This is not to impress somebody else. This is for you to understand what it takes for you to succeed. And if you have those, then great. Then carry on. But if you don't have some of the required traits, then you need to know how would you bridge them. the critical traits that's what we just talked about. Every leader must possess. One of the things, for example, is command of numbers, to be able to understand the numbers. If you are just not that kind of a person, it doesn't mean that you don't get into business. It simply means that you must have a partner who can supplement you and your skills about numbers. If you are not organized, one of the traits is you got to be ultra organized to the point of being having OCD about different things. But you're not that. You're the exact opposite. You're casual. You're kind of a person who thrives in just deciding on the spur of the moment on how you should operate. Clearly, a business cannot be run with that kind of a mindset. That means you got to have a partner who's invested in the business, who's able to supplement what you can provide and give the business what it really needs. And we'll cover those the critical traits as a part of this stage. And then the detailed questionnaires and evaluation is what we'll put out there for you, just to see and try to figure out that every recommendation that we make is there for a reason. So we'll try to explain to you what it is, what it does for you, and why and how it's critical for the success of your organization. And then access to capital is really the most simplest point. You're starting off a business. Do you have the capital it takes to grow? It's not just the startup capital that you needed to invest upfront. So now you have a down payment for it, or the deposit. You've got the lease now. You've got the basic tenant improvement, basic inventory for day one, and now you have it. But now you're completely wiped out. You're totally stretched out. You've got no more capital left. That's not a good sign. If you come across somebody who's potentially at this point, we'll tell them to wait or maybe to raise more capital, because you don't want to be in a position where you don't succeed because you didn't have access to the right capital at the right time. And finally, is this the right time for you? Maybe you are working on something. Maybe you've got other projects going on right now, and you're just not able to focus on this. Maybe this is not the right time. Maybe you don't have the right skills. So the evaluation process that we just went through, or you will go through as a part of this stage analysis, they'll tell you what it takes for you to succeed. Now, if you don't have some of those expertise or competencies, then maybe you need to acquire those. Maybe you need to figure those things out. Okay, so let's talk about stage two. Stage two, as we mentioned earlier, is when we have passed you, we've okayed you as a business owner. Now we're talking about what business are you looking at? Are you looking to do something online? Are you looking to go into a physical brick and mortar location? The financial analysis, due diligence, all of that. So in this section, we'll be talking about the business that you want to start. Again, detailed viability for the business, feasibility, profitability analysis. What does it take for you to start up? What kind of investments are we looking at? What kind of resources are we looking at that you need to deploy to be able to do that? Product life cycle or a service life cycle, the detailed extensive roadmap, so everyone who's involved with the business understands what you're doing right now and what you'll be working on around the corner. Discussions about MVP here stands for minimally viable product, the basic products that somebody would buy. Without that, you have nothing. Imagine being a new manufacturer for smartphones. You might create a phone they'll do more than what current breed of phones can do. Your phone can become an umbrella when it starts raining. Your phone can help you jump off a cliff and land with a parachute that's built into the phone itself. It can do all that for you. You put the phone on your neck and a jacket comes out. Of course, crazy stupid examples here, but think about a phone that does all of that and then some. And yet the basic phone features are less than desired. They're imperfect. So someone is buying a phone with the extra add-on things which are really nice to have, but at the basic level, it needs to be a smartphone that works, which doesn't lose the connection. So think about the basics. So again, in this section, we talk about when you're talking about your road to profitability, the viability of the product and the service. What is the basic minimal product that you must have? Without that, you're not offering anything to the customers, and not just focus on the bells and whistles and the expanded capabilities. The critical view of the marketplace. It's not just good to have a great product or a great service and just launch. We really have to understand what how the marketplace operates. Who are some of the giants? How did they become the giant, and how would you be able to take away some of the market share from them? How does the marketplace operate? What are some of the underlying assumptions that people make, and what are and which of those are correct, and which of them you could maybe challenge? Profitability model, we just talked about that, but this is again a very detailed, extensive from model an estimation about what does it take for you to succeed, and then with all the potential revenue that's potentially coming in, and how there are supplements to your existing financial requirements. And obviously any a company will potentially have some revenue coming in at some point in time in the first 90 days of their operation, but it is hardly ever enough for you to cover your operational overheads. So how many months of operations would it take for you to reach to have where your income, your revenue exceeds your expenses, so that therefore you are in profitability for that month? And how many more months you'll have to go through to catch up with all the investments you have made up to that point in time? So again, detailed analysis, and in this section, we're going to be making available some Excel spreadsheets that you could just use, plug in the numbers, and look at some of the charts. Should you build your product or should you buy it? Detailed analysis. Should you buy a business or should you build a business from scratch? Again, there are pros and cons for both of these, and you need to really understand what those are and how you would, in what case you would come out ahead, and whether you should buy a franchise or you should get a standalone business. A franchise is where the brand name is well established in the marketplace, and you're acquiring the rights to operate a business with that brand. And the moment you open, customers walking through the door knowing exactly what to expect. There's no learning curve required. They know what you are. They know if you are a sandwich shop, what kind of sandwich you have. They even know have an idea about the layout of your store, and you've got customers from day one. You don't have to restart. You don't have to establish yourself, but of course you are paying a fee, and in some cases a very hefty fee if you're a franchise. Whereas if you're a standalone, you don't have to pay the fee or a goodwill to anyone else, but now you have to educate your customers as to who you are, what you do, and why you are the best option around them. The business valuation matrix. How do you value a business? So when you are potentially you've got some money available, you're trying to buying a business. How would you value a business? What does it take? What questions do you go through? How would you look at something on paper and decide the true value of that? We'll give you some lessons on this as well. And then financial planning. Again, we sort of kind of mentioned that in an earlier bullet point. Financial planning is not just for your until you start your operation. It's to take you through the entire phase until you become profitable and until you have caught up and until you have paid off until you are able to start paying off your debt, if you have acquired any debt in starting up your company. Detailed, extensive financial planning is what must happen in stage two for you to really have a good chance of succeeding. Let's pause there for a moment and remind you of where we are and what we're trying to do. We covered at the beginning of this presentation some of the pitfalls that companies go through. We covered some of the challenges that they go through. We shared some staggering, sobering statistics on how likely it is for a company to fail. Yeah, we went through all that to impress you to this point that you have a chance of succeeding if you do things the right way. This is the right way. Stage one was your self-assessment. You cut corners, you fib the answers. No one will verify those, but you do it to your own peril. Stage two is about financial planning. It's about everything else that we mentioned here. This is for you to realize that what you're about to do, this is really what it takes for you to succeed. You cut corners here, you ignore some of the check boxes, and you go to the next stage and you actually start a business, then you might end up becoming one of those statistics. Remember, we've said this multiple times. All the problems that we shared earlier, they are preventable, but they're only preventable if you are truly diligent about what you need to do. let's keep going. Upfront investment required. For each business that you might want to acquire, what does it take for you to start? So again, we'll in this section, in this stage, we'll be talking about that and to see how much capital you currently have, and then how would you make that work. It might mean in certain cases for you to bring in some additional outside investors. It might mean you obtain some kind of financing from a bank. We'll go over the pros and cons and the pitfalls for all of those in this stage. Okay, so let's now go to stage three. So stage one, we passed you as a potential business owner. Stage two, we passed the business that you're about to acquire, and probably went through analysis between multiple businesses. And now finally, you have picked one. You've chosen one, and now you're actually going to start working towards one particular business. So now, by now, our vision is very no more cloudy, no more blurry. We know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to operate a shop that does this and this exactly. So now let's talk about the legal structure, the product design, and manufacturing plans. Extensive, detailed business plan, operational guidebook. How would you do everything? Your processes, your employees, your connections between the different objects. How would you do it? So extensive checklist for legal, for organizational, for marketing initiatives before you can open your door. Detailed checklist for the physical store. If that's for the space you're in, and a brick and mortar store, then you really must understand what it takes for you to enter. And if you have never done this before, you would be shocked at how extensive this could be, how problematic this could be if you don't have a firm grip on it. We just talked about when people usually talk about a store, they just talk about the location, maybe the frontage, maybe the access to the store, maybe they look at the shopping center itself, but they don't always factor in the parking space, the availability for parking, the signage of the store inside and outside, how much of light comes into the store, and how much of store is visible from the outside, what kind of foot traffic would be coming to you, who is the anchor in that shopping center, is it a lively shopping center or is it dead beyond a certain time? Are you most of an evening operation or a daytime operation? All of these factors that must go in your site selection. We'll give you the checklist to help you understand what they are. But once you understand this, then this checklist here will guide you through the steps that you must go through to make your store as attractive as possible to your customers. And again, if it's an online sales option, then what does it take for you to set up your site? If it's an Etsy store, or if it's a full-blown e-commerce store that you're hosting on your own hosting server, how do you develop it? What are the components? What are the features and functions available directly on the website? And what features you are co-branding with the different outside partners? Who could be your partners? If you're selling goods, for example, are you subject to collecting sales tax? How would you determine the sales tax for each based on the zip code? These are all questions that you must answer before you start deploying something. And yes, there are many companies offer tools, and you could just go ahead and use the tools and shortcut some of the steps. But you must at least understand what the steps are, what questions are that you must answer, right? So this is what we provide in when we are going through stage three. We go over a detailed analysis of what does it take for you to set up an online store, if that's indeed what you're trying to do. But whether you're an online store or a physical store, your product design is ultimately what everything boils down to. Your manufacturing standards, distribution strategy, your packaging strategy, how would customers receive the product, how would they open the product, how would they use the product, right? All of these factors are really critical, and the best design, the best planning here, it could be completely be swapped out if you don't have the basic fundamentals in place. So in this section, in this stage, we'll go over the very basic fundamental. And inventory management, as we mentioned earlier, everything we are doing is trying to make the store exciting for the customers to walk in, appealing. They walk in, but you don't have the product that they want. So how do you manage your inventory? What's the basic SKU management principles? Again, different stages, different for requirements, different possible options for a stage three as compared to stages four or five. So we'll talk about that as well. Your channel partnership. Who are your how are you selling your products? your goods? What channels? Is it online? Is it through physical stores? Do you own the stores, or you're selling them to somebody else? Is there any third party, any other distribution company in the middle? We'll ask you some questions, and based on your answers, there'll be a strong set of recommendations. Your plans, your 30-day plan, 60-day plan, 90-day plan, where do you expect to be? So when you're about to launch a store, you need to know exactly where you need to be at all these major milestones for any new startup. And based on that, you'll start planning. And this planning is not just for top line revenue or the bottom line gross profit margin. It could be for your employees. It could be your product roadmap. It could be for your partnership strategies. It could be for all aspects of your operation. So you must have this detailed plan charted out ahead of time before you open your door. And the detailed revenue projections. How much revenue do you anticipate? Where would the revenue be coming from? What channels would it be coming from? What would it take for you to earn the revenue? Your customer acquisition cost, everything to do about the revenue. You got to really master it before you start the business. And we'll help you do that. And then finally, hiring your first batch of employees. Again, a physical store would require that. It could potentially require that if it's you and your partner who are potentially going to be the ones opening up the store. Then yes, even though we don't recommend that, but that's what a lot of business owners actually start off with. But you need to have some sense of bringing on employees on board to give you some time to be able to kick back and focus on the big picture. And again, we'll help you do that as well. So again, in stage one, we went through a self-assessment. We qualified you to be a good to have good potential possibilities to be a business owner. In stage two, we walked you through the acquisition process of a business. Stage three was when you when you decided what you're going to do, and you picked one, and now we're actually going towards the journey of everything you need to do, exhaustive checklist, and for you to start the door. When you start the door, you're now in stage four. You're in operation. So a detailed profitability analysis that we did earlier. So that was the projection, and now we'll be doing the actual, and we'll compare the actual against the projection. If we met the projections, great. If we did not, let's figure out what happened. Let's figure out what assumptions we had made, and correct those assumptions for all periods from here on out. Performance benchmarks. How are we doing? How are we doing against our own benchmarks? How are we doing against our projections? How are we doing as compared to the other companies? How are we doing compared to other companies in a similar space who went through a startup process in a similar marketplace, right? All of these questions that must be asked and answered for us to truly understand how we are doing. Benchmarks and performance analysis, they're crucial activities for us to truly understand how is it that we are doing. If without this, it's like studying for an exam, but without having the actual exam. What does the exam do for you? What does the final exam do for us? It tells us how well we know the subject matter. This is really a gauge of the same. How well do we know what we are doing? And again, we mentioned earlier to bring in the right advisors, the right partners, the right coaches to guide you through all of these steps. This is where you would see the benefit of that. That if you are happy with making $100 per square foot of your store, and your advisor says that, are you kidding me? For your within this industry, you should be aiming $300 a square foot. It's only an outside perspective that would tell you, educate you on where you should be, where you're potentially falling short, and what you could do to fill in some of the gap. Let's keep going. The vendor contracts. So what are the vendors? Who are the vendors who are providing your goods and services? What is their contract with them? What understanding, what negotiations have you done with them to come up with the best SLAs that benefit you, that also doesn't hurt them? Remember, the discussion with the vendor has got to be a win-win. If it's one-sided, then it doesn't last in the long run. It must be both ways. Outsourcing options, delegation option. Clearly, as we can understand, a startup owned by maybe two or three partners, between them, they cannot manage every aspect of their operation. It is not humanly possible. So when that happens, then what do? You start outsourcing, start giving some of the the functions, perhaps not the core functions, but some of the required functions to somebody on the outside. Let's say you package, you sell, you ship the products out to the customers. You have a warehouse. Maybe you could outsource the packaging and shipping portion to a different company. Maybe they'll take some of your profit margin, but in return, given the expertise within the space, if you have chosen the right company, they'll take over one crucial aspect of your operation, crucial and time consuming. That's what you want. Delegation within the team or outside the team. Maybe we'll find somebody on the TaskRabbit on a website like that that can take over some of your invoice reminders, for example, some of the daily things that you need to do. Again, some of these are major discussions that you must be had between the team members, but some of them could be very simple way of organizing some of the basic things that we do. The idea here being that in stage 4 you are really running the company. You are trying to not go under. That's really the entire focus at this stage. You want to run a profitable company and you want to increase your top line revenue. You want to make sure that you are doing everything that's within your power, even something that's maybe slightly beyond your power and your range of competencies to be able to survive. And when you do that, then you might have to give up some of the profit share. You might have to give up some of the control of the company just because you must focus on what's crucial at this stage of your organization. So the final point here is what we just mentioned is you must understand that you're focusing on your top line revenue and you're focusing on building the market share. Everything else, if it's not principal, if it's not core to your operation, it could be outsourced, it could be delegated. You don't necessarily have to spend your crucial time, your muscles and your energy and your sweat equity in those areas. Your time, your mental availability is really crucial, and it must be focused in the right area, in the right direction. So, assuming you have done all this, assuming in stage 4 you have been successful, you've gone through maybe a year or two, you have survived, and you are doing decent. Maybe you have reached some of the areas of profitability. You are doing okay. Now this is the time when for you to really go big. For really start looking at your operation from a very detailed view in terms of your how well you are operating, how efficient is your organization, the process flow between the teams. How well do you do this? How well are your people performing? Is your engineering team coordinating well with your product design team? Is your product design team working in close cahoots with your sales team, with your marketing team? Is your online branding team, is your online communication team, your website, do they have the right information about your products and features and list of services? All of these different teams, different departments, which are potentially by the stage run by different people, they all have to be completely in sync. They all have to be speaking the same language, conveying the same message to the customer. That you're a united company, that you've got all your pieces in place, that everything that happens, every other component of the company, it gets to know about that and they're able to react. So that's really what the stage 5 is all about. Whatever you have done so far, you could choose to be in stage 4 on a regular on a long basis, but we really want you to bring a company to stage 5, where you're really able to sit back and relax, maybe take some time off as an owner. You've definitely earned it, but this is where the company really becomes a company. This is a stage where, and we'll go over this detail. There's a very subtle difference between a startup mindset and a company's mindset, and we'll talk about this later on as well. But the whole idea of this, just to mention here, is that the stage 5 is when you're able to sit back and not just manage to run this as a company, but that also allows you to zoom out, to look at the big picture view of seeing where you are, where you want to be heading, and to really start planning for the future. You're not able to do that if you are the one managing the counter and filling up the items on your shelves, and dealing with the vendor, and calling the landlord because your bathroom is leaking, and dealing with your next door neighbor who is taking away all your parking spots, right? So the next point, creating performance milestones. In this phase, Remember, we said earlier the stage 4 is all about survival. Clearly, you've gone past that. So now in stage 5, we are now looking to see how well we are doing against all the benchmarks that we had previously identified. How well have we done about those? So if we hit the goals every time, maybe they were not aggressive enough. Let's try to up the chart just a little bit. Or if we continue to fall short, then what are the processes that we should enact? We should introduce into our processes so we are able to not fail in reaching those lofty milestones. We make adjustments, right? So this is what we do in stage 5. Expansion in the range of products and services. Initially, we talked about the MVP. We introduced the notion of that. We talked about the fact that when you're just deploying the product, you don't probably have every SKU available, not every product in every size and in every color. But this would be a time for us to figure out where you could expand into, what more products you could add to your mix, or within the same product, what more variety you could add. If you have a product, what service you could do. If you, for example, are selling furniture, could you add maybe the delivery and installation as a part of your operation, maybe as a part of a separate company that you own and operate, but it acts differently. These are the questions and choices and options that we'll cover in stage 5, where you have done the basics and now we're really trying to consolidate our operation and trying to reach a point where we could be massively successful. And these questions and these steps will allow you to do that. Expansion in the number of channels. If you're selling it online only, maybe it's time to partner with a brick and mortar store and try to have your goods and services available in physical stores. So customers are able to go and actually hold them, touch them, feel them if you're selling clothes. So they could go to a fitting store, fitting room and try them on and see what it feels like. Clearly that's a huge departure from selling something online alone. Similarly, if you are a brick and mortar store only predominantly, maybe it's time to look into online as an option. It substantially increases the number of potential customers, but then again, if it's a product that requires someone to feel it, to touch it, how would you then be able to do it? All questions, all right questions, they need you need to answer these as you look at the number of channels. Number of channels also means the discussion also revolves around where are you selling your product. If it's being sold in physical stores, then are these your stores, company owned and operated stores, or are they other stores where they're selling your competitors' products also, and your product just happens to be there? So if that's the case, then how would you stand out? How would you make them focus on your product more than they focus on your competitors? Right. So these are the questions that you must ask, and you must train your people, your employees. Again, how do you even start your training process? But before that, you need to first understand what is it that you're trying to achieve and what channel options are available to you. In this stage, we'll be covering all of that, and we need to cover all of that. Going beyond that, what are your management requirements, management hierarchy, employee hierarchy? How many employees do you have by this stage in your company? Every area that initially we said is okay to outsource, is okay to delegate, because as a startup business owner, you don't really have the time or energy to focus on every aspect, every corner of your business. Maybe it's time to revisit that. Maybe it's time to bring in some of those competencies in house. They, of course, they you'd be doing that for multiple reasons. The cost is oftentimes reduced. If the work is crucial enough for your operations, it and requires a close harmony between the other teams, it can best be achieved if the internal teams are managing it and you don't have to deal with the vendors and their communication structure. Remember, you may not be the biggest client for the vendor, so you might be at their mercy for certain parts of your operation, and you really don't want to be in a position where you are being held back or your product manufacturing is being held back because the vendor changed their priorities. And finally, training and performance benchmarks. So as you train your employees, as you train yourselves even on how to manage a larger organization now, what are the new performance benchmarks that you must add now? We talked about setting up the benchmarks earlier on and the milestones, and then as you hit the milestones, we recorded how well you did those. But now this is the time for you to establish a new baseline and to really start a very aggressive growth plan. And that all happens if you successfully check off all the boxes that we have got in stage 5. And when you have done that, and when you have done that successfully, then we are in stage 6. That's when you start talking about massive growth of your organization. When you bring in external partners, when you bring in substantially other lines. If you're a car maker, for example, you've been focusing on sedans and coupes. Now you could get into SUVs, or you could bring in other partners to bring in other cars for you. Maybe you could be talking about co-branding options. So in almost everything you do until stage 5, when you've reached stage 5 completely, then you have a very successful operation. It's making money, everyone is happy, the things are working well, your customers are happy, your process is very well designed and well run. It's like a well-oiled engine, and it's working well. And in all honesty, for many companies out there, stage 5 is maybe the best they would want to do. Maybe they don't want to grow into a second location. Maybe they don't want to grow outside the area where they're currently operating. They're great in doing what they're doing, and they realize that growth comes with its own pitfalls and penalties. But if you do want to grow beyond that stage that you're at in stage 5, then this stage 6, here we'll walk you through all the different steps. What does it take for you to open up a second location? What kind of management structure would you need to have in place? Should it be close enough to the first location so you could then have trained employees go and train the workforce of the other team, or cover some of the backup as they might be understaffed in on certain days of the week? Or if it's close enough for you to have perhaps a different specialty. And this is one example of this could be if you're a dentist, and all your patients are coming in, but you're not an orthodontic practice, and you need to send those customers to somebody else. What if you are able to open up your own orthodontic practice, your own clinic, which is just a few miles from your first practice? Now you're able to refer your patients to your own other partner clinic. Right, so this is what we mean when we say expansion and growth beyond your initial setup. The checklist for multiple locations, again, whether it's based on geography, whether it's based on physical product offering, it could be based on so many different factors. Or maybe you have built an operation where it's done so well, it's so process oriented, that you could maybe think of becoming a franchise. Even though we strongly suggest that we hold off on the franchise discussion until you've got at least 5 working locations. But regardless, this all will happen in stage 6, that you've got multiple locations, they're working well, you've got processes in place, and you've got very well defined, rigorous procedures that everyone must follow. And once they do, then you can guarantee them of a certain success, overall quality standards. Once you have been able to do that, then yes, franchising is definitely an option that you could look at. And again, in this section, we'll talk about what does it take for you to become your own franchise operator. Your exponential growth plan. How would you grow? In what area do you grow? Do you grow internationally now? Right? So all the growth options that a company might have, that previously they were limited because they were still in stage 5, this is the time now to really widen your horizon, widen your base. Maybe go global, right? Or maybe grow by acquiring other companies, other smaller firms. Maybe you've become a 10-store operation of offering, for example, insurance products and goods and services, and now you acquired another location that has 5, maybe in a complementary market. Now just because by acquiring them, you now became a 15-store operation rather than growing organically by opening up one new store at a time. All of these options are there for you. And finally, your exit plans and your exit strategies. And we'll cover this in detail in the next stage. But here we're just talking about as you are on your growth spurt, as you're trying to grow beyond when you initially set up, even perhaps beyond your wildest imagination. Your company has now reached a point where it's now growing. What are your exit plans? This is at this stage we'll start jotting them down. We'll start identifying how you could potentially exit, what your options could be, and maybe we could bring in some brokers on stage, on the scene, to help you figure out what some of the options are. And with that, let's come now to stage 7, your exit. We just mentioned that. So, what are the exits for a company? If you think about it, a company could exit by having done really well. And let's say someone comes in and they write you a check for the entire organization that you have built, and you take the money, a lot of money, and you walk away. That's a great exit, right? Or it could be merged into a larger company for maybe for a much larger payoff. Even great. Or if you've done really well and the market is right and the climate is right, you might be able to go IPO and go public on your own product. Eh, Great option, great exit for many organizations. Or the flip side of it. Let's say you did everything right, but somewhere between stages 4 and 5, the company began to falter. It did not do as well as the initial expectation was. Maybe the market shifted, or maybe the entire landscape of the product shifted. Imagine that could happen as well, right? That if you just open a gas station, for example, in a very affluent area, no, imagining and thinking that the gas volume of the prior years were a good indicator for you to continue to do well, but now all the cars around you have turned to electric cars, EVs, and you don't have the sales that you really needed to manage and your operation and to pay off your debt. So there could be a whole series of factors that could happen that could form your negative exit. So we'll talk about those possibilities in this section as well. So once again, positioning your business for a sale, detailed overview of mergers and acquisitions. What does it take? How do you position yourself? How do you even look at offers? How do you figure out which option is better for you? Do you want to get paid in cash, or do you want to get paid in stocks of the acquiring company? In which case, do you personally come out ahead? And in which case, your company's shareholders come out ahead? In which case, would your employees come out ahead? All these questions will be answered as we talked about the detailed specifics in stage 7. And then, if you when you do exit from a company and you walk away, what are your options for your next for the next phase of your life? Do you want to just go ahead and retire, or do you want to have a reasonable non-compete written into the contract, so you're not locked out for life? Remember, this is a domain that you own, that you have worked your entire life or a good part of your life in. You've got contacts, you've got the know-how. Would you want to do something within the domain? Some of the usual non-compete clauses are very, very strict in terms of what you can do. So this is where once we give you the right guidance, you should always seek legal help to come up with the contract language that gives you the most options as you go forward. And then we just talked about this a moment ago, how to shut down, how to close a company gracefully. At the beginning of this presentation, we talked about some of the staggering statistics about the business failures. We said that 20% of the businesses, 30% will fail in the first 3 years. We said, or the first 2 years, 50% in the first 5 years. Huge percentages, and really grossly negative percentages. But think about this: if you went through the entire exercise, you started a company, and you went through everything, and yet the market changed, and now you're not doing as well as you thought you would. So this is really at a point where when we're consulting with a company, we really sit down and do a very honest assessment of the company and their opportunities. Remember, your time is worth a lot. Your opportunities are worth a lot. Are you better off in spending your time and your energy into something that's not likely to grow to a point where you hit the ultimate success? Or maybe you're better off in just winding down your operation, maybe retaining a portion of the business that you could perhaps do on the side, and while focusing on something else to get back on your feet, while you regroup your resources, while you resharpen your knives to make a comeback within the industry in the next year or 2 or 3, and relaunch your product or relaunch a completely different company. If you do that, then think about this. Not just your failure becomes your strength, but the experiences that you have gone through, it means you are almost immune from a second failure. All the failures that we've earlier talked about are predominantly for companies that just didn't know what they were doing. They just were not aware of it. But that would not be you, because with the past experience, even though it turned out to be negative, if you end up shutting down the organization, the whole company, even that has taught you enough for you to know the pitfalls as you relaunch yourself in the next phase, to know the pitfalls and to figure out how would you circumvent them. So again, exiting is never an end of the world, and we always look at this in a very constructive way. And we hope that you will learn as you continue this journey with us. So with that, friends, we come to the end of the first lecture of the boot camp. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you find something of value here. We hope you would come back for the next section. And if you do, then this is what we'll cover in the next class. The 7 stages of business. We just stopped covering them. We were at a slightly high level. We'll go into a detailed analysis of what every section entails. We'll cover obviously the main objectives of each of those stages, but clearly we want to focus on how your priorities, how your view changes as you go from stage to stage, even on the same topic. One example of that would be employees. What kind of employees must you have when you are in stage 4, very early on in the process, and you're the one who's running the show, the store or the operation hands on? You really need people who are just followers, who can just follow your direction and do exactly and come back to you and tell them that they've done the job. You really don't want people who think on their own and who could potentially deviate from your standards, from your guidelines. But as you grow, you really want to have a very strong and intelligent employee base that can think outside the box, come up with creative solutions, and ultimately you need to empower them so they're able to hit the lofty targets. You don't want to bring in the best employees on board and limit them in what they can do. So that was just one example. But so in the next class, we'll go over the same 7 stages in more detail. We'll talk about why businesses fail. A detailed analysis. We covered some of the points earlier in this presentation just to give you as a highlight, but we'll go over these items in detail, and we'll divide them into 4 different categories. Come back and stay tuned and figure out what those categories are. The skills and traits that every business owner must possess. That's really a crucial part of stage 1, as we mentioned earlier multiple times, that for you to succeed as a business owner, there are some basic things which are fundamental to you and to your operation. What are those things? We want you to truly understand those, and we want you to use our checklist that we'll provide as a part of our next presentation to really go yourself, sit down in a room by yourself, go through the checklist and do an honest assessment. Or maybe go a step better than that. Sit down with all your partners. Sit down with your spouses, with your husband or wife, and get them to evaluate you. Because remember, we are trying to ultimately find out what you are really good at, and what are the areas where maybe you would need some help. Isn't it best to identify what those areas are so you're able to better figure out a way on how you would manage those areas rather than being oblivious of those? So this exercise will help you understand yourself truly in a way that'll benefit you. And yeah, it could be a little harsh, we acknowledge that, but ultimately the idea would be that we want you to succeed, and we really want you to understand what it takes for you to succeed. And finally, in the next class, we'll also cover how to develop a winning partnership. So when between you and your partners, how would you share the responsibilities? How would you even divide the distribution of responsibilities and ownership and all those questions that every business must go through? So we'll cover these questions also. All right, so about the resources that we mentioned in this presentation and also in the future presentations, please go to this website newbizadvisors.com and register yourself and sign up, of course, for email updates. And once you do, we'll send you an email with the links to all the attributes, all the material that we're going to be making available. We'll provide you the links for all the courses that we have mentioned. Some of the courses are currently available, some we are currently working on. So as they become available, we'll be sure to send you copies of the links to those courses as well. And we'll give you access to this online library free of charge for 3 months. And so please feel free to please do go ahead and do your email registration so we can make all these resources available to you. And for you to get access to all the courses, please go to this website nadeemogul.gumroad.com. So, with that, we thank you so much for your time and for your attention and for you to coming on board with us and for you to give us an opportunity to stay with you to give you the very basics about the business. This is a really long road ahead of us, and we are excited that you've come on board with us so we can take you through all the different stages, all the different steps of business ownership. Yes, there's excitement, there's exuberance, there is exhilaration, there are some times when we are down, when things are just not going according to the plan. But as humans, we have learned how to evolve. We've learned how to evolve through the worst of the situations, and we'll do it over here as well. We'll try to figure out what does it take for us to truly be a step ahead, so we could see something from coming from a mile away, so we're able to position ourselves in the best way, so we could whether avoid a preventable problem, or so we develop the views and the eyesight to be able to see what problem we are facing, and therefore find a way to circumvent that. So again, exciting journey ahead. Please come back and bookmark the site definitely, and please come back and join us for the next lecture. Thank you again.